as people arrive, we'll continue to let them in, but in the meantime, we'll go ahead and officially get started. And I want to thank y'all for being here again. My name is Andy Pendoli. I'm with MIG. I'm part of the project team that the city brought on board as part of the Hermosa Beach climate change adaptation and resiliency measures to address coastal flooding. So it's been a really interesting study here so far. We'll go to the next slide, and I want to just briefly orient you all to the Zoom controls. We know that many people are very familiar with Zoom after all of our remote meetings and such over the last 2 years, but just to be sure, we want to make sure you're aware of the specific tools that you may use tonight as part of being part of the meeting. So we'll be able to mute and unmute at certain times when we open it for discussion, and that's going to happen at many times during the meeting tonight. Of course, your video on and off as you like. You can, of course, see all the participants that are here tonight, either in list or on screen. Chat will be really important at any time tonight. Feel free to give us comments or questions in the chat. We'll be responding to them, again, at key points in the meeting. So we welcome the chat. It's really helpful because with you submitting in the chat, we have it automatically recorded, which is great. Of course, if you'd like to speak over audio at key points in the meeting, we'll definitely be able to make that happen. If you use the raise hand function, as you can see on screen, under reactions, that'll be really helpful for us. And we'll be able to do that at key points in the meeting. And again, you can adjust your view using that setting as well. So with that, we'll go to the next slide and then move into the agenda a little bit more here. And in a moment, we're gonna bring, actually, I think I will now. I want to introduce Doug Kraus with the city, and he's just going to give some initial welcome remarks again to all of you, and just a quick overview of the study at a very high level, and then we'll get into the detailed presentation here in a moment. So Doug, please.
Thank you, Andy. So good afternoon, everyone, and definitely thank you for your time, for being here. Probably the primary objective of this project is to get people aware of this and get their feedback. And so my name's Doug Kraus, I'm with the city, and I want to just give you a little context for what's going on here tonight. Even though this is the last public meeting for this project, this still all has a long ways to go. So I want to let you know, I'll put my email and my phone number in the chat. And if you have any concerns, little tiny details, big high level stuff, please email me after this, because not only for developing these concepts, but for the long-term, potential of these projects, I need to know what you think and what your thoughts are. So the 3 sites that you'll see tonight have all been in our capital improvement project list for a while for the city. And they've been in there as just simple street projects. And we, as a city, had an opportunity, we're successful in winning a grant from Caltrans to hire a consultant to study these 3 sites and not only come up with ideas for mobility improvements, which is kind of what these projects were originally intended for, but also to incorporate elements that could help prevent flooding, adapt to sea level rise, and essentially incorporate the potential of climate change down the road, which is important because we're a beach city. Hermosa Avenue is basically at sea level. And these are things we, as a public agency, need to incorporate for any future project that's at risk. So it was a great opportunity for us. And what the result is, as you'll see tonight, is concepts, right? How can you do a street project, but throw in elements that will help protect the community from flooding and other elements of change down the road, but also, improve traffic flow, etc. So you'll see those. And I want to reiterate, and I'll probably reiterate this again, is that these are just concepts. The purpose of these is to see what it could look like, get the community talking, see what things interest you, what your concerns are, what your awareness is of sea level rise and everything else, and then get your feedback. And as I said, long term, please keep in touch with me, because if these projects move on to other stages, the city will of course be in touch with everyone and outreach and community engagement, but also to get your thoughts that can be incorporated into a potential final engineered plan, for construction. So that being said, I'll put my info in the chat, and please enjoy this, and I'll send it back to Andy. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Doug. Yeah, so we're very excited. We have a lot to share with you tonight. Those of you who've seen previous presentations will see a lot of familiar concepts with some new developments to share. And for anybody who might be here new to the effort, we've got a lot to soak in and take in. But again, as I noted, we'll do the project overview and latest developments, give you a little bit of again background on the project, the why, and what we've been doing most recently in particular. And then we've got various options and features, if you will, at the 3 different sites which we'll be talking about specifically going forward. And then we have a number of places in the program tonight where we want to pause and have community discussion with you and talk about different considerations and thoughts you have, reactions to these different concepts that are emerging. And then we'll talk about next steps overall. And I wanted to make sure we're clear. There's no, what's being developed so far are concepts that will be shared with City Council this year as well. Not specifically that they're going to make an immediate decision on funding or building anything at this time. This is an opportunity to develop different ideas and explore them and potential implications for them. So no decision making at this point. It's really more about it's being more exploratory, if you will. But we'll get more into those details in due time right now. So with that, let's move right into the program. I want to introduce Jenny Zell with MIG. She's been our lead project manager on this effort. And what we're going to do is we're going to ask Jenny to proceed now. She's going to go through she's going to go through anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes of slides at a time. But we're going to pause in between each of those segments and get a chance to hear back from all of you. So thanks for your patience on that. Jenny, let's move on to this, please. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Andy. So as both Andy and Doug mentioned before, we've met many of you before. We've been in conversation with you over the past several months as we've been working on the project. And again, I just want to thank you for your valuable time and really the thoughtful contributions we've received so far. And I know being on Zoom, especially after 5, really shows your commitment and your commitment to your community. So thank you. So we have had 2 community workshops so far. We've had 6 official stakeholder meetings, and we've also spoken with some of you in person out on site. You have a beautiful beach at Hermosa. It's been actually a fun project too, just to get to walk and check out your place. And this is some of the feedback we've received in some of our different meetings. It's pretty detailed. And also, in addition to getting your feedback, that we have analyzed data, we have modeled hydrology, hydraulics, we have Moffitt Nickel, coastal engineers who are on our team as well. And we also have CRC, coastal restoration consultants that are biologists, ecologists. We've got myself, I'm a landscape architect. We have civil engineers. We've got a great team looking at this from a lot of different angles. And so we've looked at current conditions, projected sea level rise scenarios. We've calculated areas, and like Andy was saying, we've made renderings and graphics to kind of represent some ideas here that we'll be looking at. And so we've heard and recorded, I'm gonna make this a little bigger so you can see it. So we've heard and recorded a lot of your preferences for proposed design options, your concern, your desired outcomes. And your priorities for people who live within the community, and that any of these eventual changes or improvements will eventually impact you. So for some of you, this might be a repeat the next couple of slides, but I want to just remind us where we've been. This project is a conceptual design for a suite of green infrastructure projects and sea level rise resiliency improvements. And those improvements are to be incorporated into planning and mobility enhancements along Hermosa and the Strand at these 3 locations. We've got the first, Hondo and Hermosa to 4th Street, second, 26th, and the third, 35th at Hermosa Avenue. These are the project overarching goals. And in previous public meetings, which are, if you missed them and you really want to see it, they're available on the city website. And so in previous public meetings, we walked through this, really what the hazards are associated with climate change and how that's relevant to us here in Hermosa Beach. And we dug into that a lot deeper in public meeting number 1. And we also looked at what are some of these potential flooding measures that would come flood inundation caused by rain events when the storm drain gets backed up. What can we do to address that? What about flooding coming over, inundation coming from seawater that are driven by storm events? We'll look at that more in depth. We're getting into that quite a bit more in depth later. And other options caused by seawater blocking the storm drains. So some of these solutions are technical and some of them are biological and a little more natural. And so this is a representative of some of that studies and what we're looking at. So we have excuse me, you can see here, if you can read at the bottom, what we've modeled is the coastal storm modeling system. It's a Cosmos version 3, phase 2. It's this great online tool developed by USGS. And we've also looked at Mike Urban and Mike Flood that separately is giving these flood determinations for node floods. So we can get more into that into the reports later if you're interested. And so we looked at various scenarios. And based from the existing conditions, 3.3 feet of sea level rise, 6.7, even 16.4. And what I want to note here, which is really key, is that even the 6.7 foot of sea level rise, it's not imminent. There is a 1 in 200 chance of this happening by 2100. And so that's just a reference point, but that's the scope of this project, is to look at these different scenarios. And really 1st through 4th, this is the poorest, this area, this site that we're looking at now, site 1, it's kind of the poorest draining area of the study, and sea level rise we found it compounds the issues, the flooding issues on this area. And so really what this tool helps us do is look out into long term and how can we combine infrastructure improvements to resiliency here. And so we've explored a couple of options, 2 options we have now. And again, we're calling these options, but you know, there's many deviations or iterations of this that can happen. But this one's terrific. And we heard back from the community that we really need to show an option that keeps traffic and streets, traffic flow, and as it is today, and still addresses those flood concerns that we have for this area. And so this is along, like I mentioned, Hermosa Avenue. It's from Hondo to 4th Street. And this option, it keeps the existing sidewalks and those 2 lanes of north and southbound traffic in place. And it adds stormwater management in locations where we found those opportunities. Those are biofiltration planters that are located in existing parkways where there's no drive apron. Those are opportunities. And we found some areas for new permeable paving and parking spaces that can add the storm value in bioretention, to add to the bioretention filters. And this is what it, excuse me, this is, this is what it looks like in enlargement, one section of it. And so in the entire area, this option gives us little over 2,000 square feet of bioretention planting, which is terrific. And also permeable paving, 23,000 square feet of permeable paving. It could add 98 new street trees. And what this does, just to give you a reference point, so at a 10-year model, which is what we modeled for storm drain, that gives us flooding volume of about 42,000 gallons. And so the good news is that even with this kind of lighter touch, keeping the street in place, we found out that just with the bioretention planters, that gets us about half of what we need to do to absorb that volume of the 10-year storm. So that's good. When we add permeable paver, we're really right at that volume calculation for the 10-year storm. Sorry. Let me go back, give me a second. And so what those biofiltration planters look like, they're going to look something like this. I'm sure you've seen them on streets all around in different communities. And the other option, permeable paving. This provides volume reduction, infiltration. And it has some constraints. They've got to be located 10 feet from buildings. And the volume reduction is limited. And really, these can be combined with other options like tree canopies, which we showed, to help just reduce overall stormwater volumes. And so this option, option 2, really addresses mobility concerns in this, or looks at mobility concerns and combines that with increasing that storm volume capacity reduction. And so tying back to the goals of increasing mobility, this option, it adds, a two-way divided bikeway connecting Redondo north up to all the way up to Manhattan Beach. It increases pedestrian safety by reducing crossing lengths, and it also has angled parking. And we know that got pretty controversial in our last our last meeting. And so, we got some people love it, some people hate it. But what that does is it keeps the existing parking counts, which is so important to keep people and their parking and access to the beach and to local businesses. And it increases the flooding mitigation for those increased levels of storm flood, like a combination of sea level rise and increased storm volumes. And so those numbers, are of course larger. And so this is about 3.5 times the volume in the bioretention planter than we had in the previous option. It's about 2 times the volume in the permeable paving. And really the other added benefits here are, and this is something we heard from the community, is ADA accessibility and improved sidewalks. So this adds a 10-foot sidewalk and other environmental benefits with trees and some vegetation here to add just water quality benefits as well. All right, Andy.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. So this is a point we want to pause and respond to, hear your thoughts and considerations that, again, with these being concepts, these are kind of options for this site. What else would you suggest are additional considerations or concerns or benefits that you see from these options might offer the community? And happy to answer any further questions. So for example, I see a couple questions in the chat related to this. So Jenny will need your help here in answering these. First of all, will the ground be able to absorb all that water during storm, or will it be saturated given, is there a high water table? So maybe you could briefly just say between those two options as examples, how much they relatively, absorb depending upon the storm event. And then we'll move on to another question.
It's a great question. And on the biofiltration planters, the calculations that we came up with is assuming a 1.5 foot ponding depth. So those LID planters assume a ponding depth. And so, as long as they're not filled up with trash or something, that volume is pretty consistent. But yes, soils do get saturated and it does max out over time. But those volumes that I stated are generally acceptable measures, volume measures.
So they do a lot. Those options help to absorb more than currently could be absorbed today, given potential flood levels.
Yeah, it holds
Right,
it.
Jenny?
Basically, the key is it holds it. Both options, the biofiltration planters hold, and the permeable paving, really the rock gravel, there's a void in the rock that temporarily holds that water while it dissipates.
Great, thank you. Good, so hopefully, Scott, I thank you for that question in the chat. And then I wanna move to a couple street design questions. So a couple folks asking questions about traffic impact. Jenny, you showed a couple. First option basically keeps the same traffic. The second option reduces traffic lanes. So what sort of traffic impact will that look like? And, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the second option would just one-way traffic each way. There's no analysis yet about, how much traffic flow, but that would have to be something to be done in some future studies, correct? And Doug might be able to help.
We're going to Doug on this one.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's just a concept, maybe the community wants to, get rid of a lane and add a bike lane. It's just it's to get feedback and see what everybody's interested in and willing to do.
But even if the city did decide, hey, we think option 2, just one lane of traffic each way with bike lanes, we're pretty interested in that. There would still need to be some technical analysis of what would that mean for traffic flow. Is that right, Doug?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
yeah.
So there's still
traffic analysis, SQL analysis, everything else. So yeah.
So the city couldn't commit to one of those options now if they wanted to. Okay, good. So I appreciate the comments back from all of you in the chat. The chat is really helpful. Thank you for providing comments there. Yeah, kind of some of you expressing concerns, just one lane each way with the bike lanes, some concerns about that. And others have mentioned that too. So we appreciate you sharing that overall. We will, by the way, just a quick side note, there is a project webpage for this study. We'll put it in the chat momentarily, but all the information we're sharing tonight, we're gonna upload that to the city project webpage in the next week or two. So by all means, you'll be able to take a closer look at all this and look at the previous drafts that we've had up there soon. So it was just put in the chat right now. So good. And then, yeah, and I appreciate, for instance, someone's mentioned here in the chat some concern. Some cities, jurisdictions have tried removing a lane of traffic each way, and they came up with results that they were not happy with. So understood, there's lessons learned from other communities to look at closely. So good. So thank you all for those comments. And then I know another question about if this design will be replicated for the entirety of Hermosa Avenue. Again, just concept planning here, right, Jenny? Can you remind the kind of study limits of this?
Yeah, the study limits are Horondo to 4th Street. And so, and that's right. I think not understanding the entire corridor is a tough, for traffic considerations and flow for sure. That would have to be part of the extended study. This particular is how much water can we take off? And that's really what this one is about. And then start the conversation about those mobility improvements. So you're right, it's not the full, it's not the full corridor.
Absolutely. So if the city does elect to move forward with studying one or more of these options more closely, it will have to be a little more of a corridor-wide perspective and really applying closer technical studies. So good, excellent, thank you. Looking over a couple more questions. Yeah, and just to clarify, if anyone would like to speak over audio, please use the raise hand function on Zoom, if you're familiar with that. That's down in your reactions button. If you click that, the raise hand, we'll be able to call on you, and we can, you know, make sure you can unmute and all of that. So please do that if you'd like to right now. But in the meantime, I see there's a question about connectivity with the bike path on the north end of option 2. So what would connectivity points potentially look like? Again, this hasn't been a full corridor study yet, right? So Jenny or Doug, that would have to be something to be further developed for connectivity. Yeah, is that right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So definitely something that we need. Thank you, Steve, in the chat. Appreciate that. We'd have to explore that in future studies. You know, if the city decides to pursue studying these in more detail with more detailed technical analyses. So absolutely. So good. So if anyone would like to speak over audio, do let us know. I think we've gotten through here everything I've seen in the chat. So what I want to offer here, I'm going to ask Jenny to move on to kind of the next segment, the next site, and take a look at those options, and then we'll open back up for some more discussion from you all. Thank you all for this input so far. This is really helpful. Jenny, please take it away.
Sure, and Andy, I'll just add on my screen to raise your hand and get those reactions, you have to hit more. So I don't know if everybody knows that. They may already know that. Okay, so we're moving on here to site number 2. This is 26 and Hermosa Avenue. And so good news is this is higher elevation where we are up here. So a lot, except for beach narrowing, which you see, a lot of these impacts are more minimal here for the system. And it's more existing flooding under existing conditions that we're looking at in some of our options. We kind of went over some of the constraints, the issues we're looking. Everyone who's driven around Hermosa and 26 are probably familiar with some of the conflicts between pedestrian and bicycles, some of the visibility issues too at this intersection. And so the other opportunities, addition to the biofiltration, permeable pavers that are options for 26, are bioretention basins. They take up more space than we have at the Gerondo 4th section, site 1, and they provide volume reduction, water quality treatment, infiltration, and they extra habitat and extra, I would say, environmental quality benefits. And also, where there are not underground utility conflicts, there's possibility up at 26 for underground infiltration. And again, these would need to be explored in more detail. Those are options. And so, sorry. So at site 2, we've gone round and round. We got a roundabout as one option. And it's the benefits here is it provides for a continuous 2-way bikeway. It connects this section, which dies away. It provides a continuous bikeway. And also green areas for those potential stormwater treatment areas. And it may require half or full closure of 26th Street. That's this right here. We're showing it currently at a half closure. And so in this, excuse me. So for the 10-year storm that's modeled for this, the flooding that we showed in the previous slide, it's up to about 79,000 gallons. And so with this area we're showing here, a bioretention planters, we can get somewhere around 88,000 gallons. So we're with just the bioretention planters in this area, we've kind of met that 10-year storm requirement. And with permeable paving, we're at we add another 6,000 in volume reduction. And so combining the bioretention with permeable paver we get closer, we get about 70% of a scenario we would see not until 16.7 feet of sea level rise. And so those sea level rise scenarios, the incremental at 3.3, a 6.7, they don't really impact. What we've modeled shows it doesn't really impact or add additional surface level flooding up here on Hermosa Avenue. So that's really some good news. And what this option does too, again, it can demonstrate how you combine these climate resilience measures, these flooding mitigation measures with future, public work projects.
And Jenny, sorry to interrupt you, but between this and the next option, you'll show traffic flow also. I know we've heard from community members that this intersection is challenging, problematic in terms of flow and safety for traffic. And so this option and the next option will show too also endeavors to try and explore some new solutions to improve safety, improve flow and travel times. Is that correct? Pending further analysis of traffic times and such, but is that fair to say? Okay.
100%.
We've heard that from
Another
community
benefits
members,
we
right?
talked about before, there's no stop signs, so you have less emissions here. There's a lot of great things that that happen in this option that we will probably can get into discussion. Okay. Option 2, this really turns Greenwich into a T intersection. It provides, and also again provides additional areas for stormwater planters, and it helps really to clarify pedestrian crossings, making that area safer. And like option 1, it continues the divided bikeway, which you can see here. And also some of these light green areas in front of the businesses, we did hear feedback that providing bike racks and some of that would be great to have here in these areas. So these could be thought of more maybe as mini plazas. And again, what this gets us, these numbers are very similar to, these numbers are very actually similar to Site 2. And, we're almost at that 10-year goal, even with just the bioretention planters. That's, a larger area. But in this option, you probably need the bioretention with permeable to get at the flood reduction in that 10-year scenario. And we're at about 60% for that, far off risk 16.4 level. And let's move on to this, Andy, additional considerations.
Yep, absolutely. So, and I appreciate, I see some of the comments and questions coming in, which is great. Jenny, thank you for that. And so couple things I wanted to react to. Jay, thank you for your initial thoughts here too as well. Yeah, kind of the flow and, the bike lanes going northbound, heading into traffic. Again, this is one location, and absolutely more detailed kind of comprehensive design and engineering would be necessary to make sure that concept would work. Either concept would work really. And I did want to, and I want to answer your question in just a moment here. And also the letter J noted that, or asked the question, has there been a study? No, there's not been a study yet about either option, impact on traffic flow, numbers, congestion time, speeds, things like that. That's not part of this plan. If the city decides to move forward with more detailed engineering and design, that level of analysis would occur to get a better understanding of what sort of changes to the flow, to mobility flow would look like. So thank you for that question. And then Jenny, I want to please clarify any of that if I misspoke, but also if you can help answer the question, if you can put option 2 back up and answer the question, how does one turn right from Hermosa Avenue in this scenario?
Turn right from Hermosa heading north? I'm sorry.
Maybe you can just kind of point to those.
Turn right,
heading south. Sorry, if you're heading south. Thank you, Jay, for clarifying in the chat. So if you're heading south on Hermosa, how do you turn right?
This is the right-hand turn.
Okay. So it's kind of turns into a T intersection there. that would either maybe be stoplight or stop signed. Not sure yet, again, at this concept level.
No stoplight.
No stoplight.
Stop signs.
Maybe
Yeah.
stop
So
signs.
traffic circle, no stop signs. This, yes, there will be stop signs.
So yeah, absolutely. So Jay, into your further reflection there, yeah, maybe it's a little tight. And again, more closer, the initial conceptual work, again, from the design team suggests this is probably workable. Again, more close analysis, design engineering would need to put that to the test to confirm more specifically. So actually wanted to, you know, make sure everybody knows that more closer work would need to be done. So.
And I'll add too, we did have a study here that would have required a traffic light because of the crossing, the size of the crossing required, and we heard loud and clear, nobody wants that. So that was removed. And I will add, again, you're right, there hasn't been an official traffic study. There was a traffic study that was done during COVID. Doug could speak to this later more if there's more questions, but there was a traffic study that was done to add this outdoor parklet right around here. And that did show, it was very interesting. It's more bikers than cars, even during the week that go through this intersection.
Good. And I really appreciate too, Jay, again, thanks for the continued commentary about, you know, merging from 2 to 1 each way, north on 25th, and more space for the bike lane. Absolutely. I think you're bringing up more great ideas and would love to hear from others too about these are the exact considerations we want to kind of have in the mix as we move this forward to think about if there's going to be a future around potential changes like this. What else should we study more closely? So I want to thank you, Jay, and everybody for comments you've had so far and more that I hope come in here. So yeah, thank you very much. We definitely want experience from those of you who've lived and breathed these locations here, you know, whether you've been here 3 months or 30 years. So we appreciate all your input and feedback. Great. Good. So great comments here so far. Really appreciate all the time. Let's go ahead and keep moving over to site 3. And we'll be, you know, happy to circle back if anybody thinks of something else at this site later. So Jenny, if you can spend a few minutes talking about site 3. I know you've got a fair bit to show here, so this might be a little longer segment, right?
Yeah.
But still plenty of time afterwards to have discussion with participants. So go for it.
Yeah. So site 3 is right here, right at Hermosa and 35th, essentially. And what we found in our modeling is sort of demonstrated here, beach narrowing in different scenarios of sea level rise, and also a small amount of flooding that's happening at these nodes, the nodes up here. And so I think it's interesting to note too, for flooding up at this, that it's not increased at the 3.3 and the 6.7 level of sea level rise. So it's just, we didn't know that going into it. And what we're looking at and what our design solutions are focused, or what our design proposal is focused primarily here, is a condition that the outfall poses, because the outfall, the existing outfall structure that is here, it basically allows in a storm situation, it could allow flooding on the homes and the infrastructure that's behind this beach elevation. And here's a photo that Craig had given us, and he didn't take it. So the provenance is unknown, but this is an experience he had directly when he was living at 26 on the Strand, and seawater came up across the beach and flooded his kitchen in the 82, 83 El Nino storms. So we threw it in there, not scare anybody, but say this is what happened. This is Craig's direct experience here. And so we have looked at, in the past, we've looked at a couple different options for a living shoreline or a dune. And we've been, this has morphed and changed over the past couple of months. And we've heard pretty favorably in support of building a living shoreline here. And there's a couple of moves that need to happen to make this work. The first move is extending that outfall. If you're not familiar, I don't have a photo of it with me right now, but if you're not familiar, the outfall is essentially right here. And right now, or at least a week ago, that outfall was scoured out. And if you stand in it, basically the strand is even above your head level, depending on how tall you are. So there's a big excavation here that's happening right now. So that outfall structure would need to extend towards the ocean, and then a sand dune can be built up and over that structure and continue up north towards Manhattan Beach. Let me see. And then in addition, we'll look at a couple of options that explain this. There is pedestrian access maintained through the dunes at a couple of different points, and importantly, emergency access maintained in this section here between the strand and a dune. This is where it looks like now the outfall is essentially right there. And this is what it might look like with both the sand dune outfall extended. And this is about a 70 to 80 foot dune. And we still have about, I think it's 175, 180 feet, kind of what we call towel space preserved here in this option. And this option also shows a connection from the strand up north, which we'll look at a couple options, a couple of views later. But this, we can go back to it during discussion if you want to look at what these visualizations are showing. And this option shows what that dune section looks like. And so if you follow this line, this dotted line here, that's the existing beach profile. And we have an enlargement too next. That's the existing beach profile. So essentially, this is the outfall, this big gray bar you see across the bottom. That's a big pipe and extending out towards the ocean to allow this to be built up. And this allows a beach profile. This is shown at approximately 2.5 to 3.5 feet of added beach profile. And what that can help prevent in the storms we've modeled is this seawater reaching into the strand. And this is an enlargement, gives you a closer look of what that might look like. We heard from the lifeguards, this is essential to have beach access, emergency access, and also if in a high tide event that the beach seaward was removed, you'd still have access at this area here.
Jenny, sorry, real briefly, just while we're here, while
Yep.
the image is up, these, the dunes, the planted dunes, what relative height would they be as proposed here or conceptually compared to what's there now? How much higher are you going? Is it going here?
Yeah, 2.5 to 3.5 feet.
From what's existing today?
Yeah, so existing beach profile, and then dune.
So that dash line there, yeah, so.
And that height would build up over time.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Let's continue on here, and we got a lot of comments and questions. So, but I want to let you finish out the slides before we open up.
Okay.
So.
Okay, and then we'll go back to them. And the added benefit. So, I don't want to. The really cool thing about dunes is that it provides a natural measure of protection from a natural sea level rise adaptation. Because what those plants do is they trap that windblown sand that ends up going onto the strand. It traps that windblown sand, and those dunes grow. So they grow in mass and they build to protect, you know, to trap the sand. Another thing they do is that they create new habitat space. And we worked again with CRC to understand how big, you know, that dune needs to be to help support some of these native species that are here. And that's what this slide kind of illustrates, that interrelationship between those plants and the animals we might find out there. Should we stop now?
No, please finish, Jenny, because
Okay.
I think folks have a lot of questions, but I don't
Okay.
want to rush you. And if you could also reflect a little bit on the next slides, what we've also been hearing from the community, different ideas, perspectives, particularly about mobility in this location, as you show us.
So this is, you know, this is the existing situation of a stair, causes different problems, as I'm more familiar with, basically walking your bike up, and, you know, if you're in a wheelchair or something else, difficulty in reaching, you know, this natural resource. And so this option, this is a couple of options that we have here for how do we connect? How do we connect to the strand? How do we help avoid pedestrian and bicycle collisions in this, you know, very highly used and loved area? And so what we show here is we show an extension of the strand, a 20-foot link, where bicycle traffic moves north towards Manhattan Beach. Pedestrian traffic moves either up stairs or along this kind of ramped, this ramped section here. And this option we're showing is more of a mobility hub. It provides an area for bikes, a place to stop and rest on your journey. This kind of nice experience of walking up the stairs, and it creates, you know, a more of a plaza-like experience here. Oops, excuse me. This is some of the planting that you might see in that plaza-like plaza. So some ornamental planting that you would see. And we have another option here, option 2. This is a little bit more subdued, more of a natural trail and a dune approach, where you take some of this plant material that would be stabilizing those dunes, pull it across here and create added habitat value, and also have an ADA accessible route up to this area. And again, separate traffic from bicycle circulation. That planting material on both sides of the strand would be more contiguous, establishing coastal dune plant material. And this is what option 1, the more plaza-like, might look like. This is what it might look like, again, heading south, option 1. Option 2, heading north, and option 2, heading south. And so, again, we've gotten a lot of feedback here.
Can you go back to that, Jenny? Sorry, you kind of,
Yep.
just to kind of quickly had, and I'd be happy to. I just want to acknowledge, I'm really glad you added this, Jenny, that
Yeah.
you know, we've had a lot of really interesting feedback so far, and I'm already seeing more tonight and excited to hear more. You know, again, about access, about making sure this is improving access for people of all abilities, but also for emergency access as well. And a lot of interest for different recreation needs, whether you're bringing a dog, you're on 2 wheels, you're on a skateboard, you're on feet, you're on other mobility assistant devices, that we're thoughtful about how all those uses can be in this space together and have the access that it needs. Again, very safe, the safest conditions, of course, possible. So So just wanted to acknowledge that overall, and that we have to balance that again with broader mobility needs in the area as well. But and then the next slide. Let's save the next slide, Jenny. We can just go straight to additional considerations,
Okay.
and we'll come back to the next slide. So I wanted to thank you all for waiting here. I want to, I'm going to go ahead and Nadim and Frank, you raised your hand. Would you, if you'd like to speak over the audio, you should be able to unmute yourself. Go ahead if you'd like to speak. And I saw you had a comment in the chat too. So please go ahead.
Hello.
Hi.
So one thing that we wanted to, strongly, discuss in this, forum was that we only just very recently as yesterday, learned about this project, and it has a very strong impact on us. We own collectively as a family multiple properties, in this area on Shakespeare Beach, and so we wanted to not only say that we would have liked to have been better informed, but also that we're in opposition to connecting the bike path because it will bring a lot more traffic to an area that has existed for a very long time without that same amount of traffic, because the bike path currently and very efficiently continues down Hermosa Avenue and reconnects later down the road, which allows for bikers to kind of get the message that this is now a merged pedestrian and bike path. And if there was increased signage, to Jay's point in the comments, that would allow for people not to have to carry their bikes down the stairs. So,
okay, thank you for that.
We're also opposed to the dunes in a very significant way. If you want to see what that looks like, go to Playa del Rey at the end there, where it meets the area where the boats come in, and it looks like crap, and the property values are significantly depressed as a result. I think that's kiss of death for the whole area and for the whole field. I also predict that Manhattan Beach is going to be very opposed to this. We own property in Manhattan Beach. Also, we plan on bringing it up to the residents in the area as well as Manhattan Beach. We're generally very opposed to the project and on the 35th Street area. We understand it's a noble will and desire. We agree with the desire. However, we feel like we're trying to fix something that's not broken when a lot of the solution can be caused by or fixed with much better signage. That street that comes in there, 35th, is very narrow, and to add more congestion in the area is really, I think, asking for a lot of problems. There'll be a lot more people, coming down that area, dropping off their passengers, causing a lot of congestion and lack of safety. And there's significant safety considerations, I believe. There's a lot more use of e-bikes right now. Having the stairs causes people to slow down, to think, what do I want to do? Which way do I want to go, etc. I think just opening up that, it's going to cause e-bikes to just power through, and it's going to cause, significant safety considerations, bikes running into people, etc. I think the fact that Hermosa Avenue right now is the way that the e-bikes continue is a much more safe situation than the proposed alternative. I think adding more concrete space, more space for people to, gather is just going to cause people to really loiter. It's going to cause more skateboarders in the area using the concrete, creating more noise disturbances, creating more potential for altercations between people, and so on and so forth, versus what we have right now, which is a beach community that's open with a lot of access, and really no access considerations at all. Anyone that wants to access the area can easily access it. I think we're trying to fix a problem that doesn't exist.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all for that.
Better use for the money.
I appreciate the broad view of, dunes, bikeways, the level of concrete, all these are all important considerations about what change could or should or would not look like. So we appreciate you weighing in and getting involved in the process. And do want to stress too that, again, no decisions about any projects as part of this study are being made anytime soon. So a lot more kind of analysis and consideration of a lot of topics you brought up, definitely have to come into play still too. And do want to remind too that a lot of this is grounded in addressing flooding as well, and preventing flooding and stormwater backup, and potential mobility changes are to some extent kind of secondary. Their potential would come along with improvements like that. So I want to thank you for that feedback. I see other people are queued up, and I wanted to acknowledge a lot of people reacting in the chat. So thank you for that. Appreciate that as well. Let's see, I wanted to come to, let's see, we have Anne. You raised your hand. I'll go ahead and you should be able to unmute, Anne, if you wanted to chat over the audio. Anne, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Anne Gotthofer, and I've been a resident for over 40 years, my family for over 80. And I understand it's really difficult to balance the needs of the general public, our residents, our environment, as well as preparing for the future. I know you can't please everyone, and the city knows that all too well. And I appreciate the appeal Site 3 may hold for many, but I also see many problems. Many of you have pointed out some of these already, so forgive a little bit of repetition. Regarding the wheelchair ramp, as a retired physical therapist, I am a firm supporter of accessibility for everyone. However, I believe we should be able to do something better than this. For example, has any sort of mechanical stair lift or accessibility solutions been considered in lieu of paving a huge portion of our sand? Also, it's worth noting there are no services, bathrooms, handicap, or wheelchair van parking in the area. I am very concerned, as Frank mentioned, that this will primarily become a new skateboard park and a huge nuisance. Secondly, I would recommend omitting the proposed bike path extension. We should encourage the use of the current bikeway by improving directional signage for both south and north riders. And the directional arrows, for example, on the pavement up at the upper strand needs repainting. That could be done immediately. And there definitely does need to be improvement in the safety for pedestrians crossing at the top of the steps. But I don't think the extension will eliminate that.
Okay.
So there's no signs going south, and likewise heading north, there's no signs or arrows to guide them up to the bike path on Hermosa Avenue before they reach the steps. Now, do I think that the Hermosa Avenue bike path is as ideal as a new bike path on the lower strand would be? Of course not, but that's a different project, one I believe we may want to consider or reconsider. This small extension ending at a present misuse pedestrian strand is not the answer. The incline will encourage speeding, there will be congestion and safety issues at the base of the path. Lastly, I promise this is last, to encourage people to hang out at this plaza with benches, etc., while trying to preserve the beach, the sand dunes, and the vegetation just seems doomed to fail. Realistically, people will trample over the vegetation to get to the beach. I could go on, but I've taken up more than enough time already. Thank you, everyone, for your consideration.
Thank you, I appreciate that. More to come in terms of hearing more, concerns and ideas about additional considerations and options, and you're all bringing that forward here. Safety signage, are we bringing in too much? Would these bring in too much concrete? Are we sacrificing too much sand? And you've all brought up some of those. I wanted to acknowledge too what's mentioned in the previous commenters about coordination with Manhattan Beach, right at the city limit here. Certainly much of this would require some level of dual city coordination. So certainly that's just yet another example of where more kind of coordination and considerations would have to come into play. So thank you all for all these ideas and about what needs to be brought into the mix for further development of these concepts potentially. Jay Gleason, thank you. Yeah, please go ahead. You should be able to unmute.
Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you for this meeting. I'm Ann's neighbor. I've been here about 25 years, and I live right above this. That last photo was kind of taken in front of my house and Ann's house. So, I appreciate everything as Ann basically voiced all my concerns.
Okay.
I would just like to reiterate how joining the bike path, going from, from north to south and running into that lower strand area is, I mean, that is it. I can't emphasize how much of a disaster that would be. These guys fly. I'm talking 30 miles an hour in the morning on these bike rides. I mean, it would be so dangerous. It's just unfathomable having that happen. And then, I'm all for some kind of an accessibility ramp, for ADA. That's fine and everything. But again, just emphasizing what Ann said about having that whole plaza right there would just be. I mean, honestly, guys, it's just not going to work in this area. There's no way. I mean, it can't. It's all I have to say. I appreciate all your efforts and everything, but there's got to be some other solution. And then the other thing I was going to mention is that drainage that's there right now that you see that pools up over the years. I mean, I believe that is there so that it captures all of the dirty water and all the polluted water that comes out of that drain, and it soaks into the sand. That's why it's so discolored and everything there, but it prevents it from going out into the ocean. Now, granted, I mean, it'd be great to have a pipe going directly out to the ocean because it would make a better surf break for me and my friends. But, I mean, it seems to me like the beach crews kind of keep that managed very well. They're out there working on it and keeping it going. So I don't know really if all this is really necessary. But thank you very much for my time.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Jay. Appreciate all the really constructive comments from everybody here. Whether you have more concern or more interest in what's being shown, we appreciate the constructive feedback. Is really helpful. Wanted to kind of come back a little bit to the comments as well. There's some questions in the chat. Jenny, maybe you're able to kind of, if you've been able to scan over that, about how water flow is decreased by putting more concrete over the sand. I think also just to clarify, we mentioned it earlier, but there were still some questions about these potential, sand dunes, right? If were placed, and those were only proposed, that concept has them as 2 to 3 feet high. So Jenny would require bringing more sand in, right? If that was brought forward. Okay.
Well, it can. There's a couple of options that the sand dunes can build naturally over time by just fencing. Other communities are doing it now. Manhattan Beach and others are doing it now, or they could be mechanically built to provide that protection. And just to clarify, I see one question. Well, I don't know, there's a lot.
Yeah. No, why don't you
tell me what you want me to?
I'd actually like to go to someone signal me that they'd like to speak. Richard, I'm going to unmute you. Richard, you should be able to unmute yourself and speak over the audio. Can you go ahead and try that?
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thanks, Richard.
Thank you very much for helping me out on that.
Of course.
So in general, as far as all of these sites go, I don't favor any decrease in traffic lanes because I think I understand cars may be going out, but they're not going out in a long time. And so I'm against that, particularly at that site too, where there used to be a spot there with backward parking being planned. I'm not sure if that's still the case. If it is, I'm against that. At least when you're backing out in the normal way, you can creep slowly out, allowing for any traffic to recognize your maneuver and stop with enough space to let you move out and then proceed down the road. I also don't feel that the impacts of removing the retaining walls along the existing stairway here at the 35th site and the construction of 1 or maybe 2 new ramps with benches at this north end has been given appropriate consideration. In many of the comments, I'm just done a second, I guess. Okay. This is the highest elevation along the Hermosa Strand, and lowering the elevation of the beach here is not going to improve the city's ability to meet the challenge of sea level rise and more severe weather events. I personally have never seen any flooding happen at any of those drains that were circled or colored on one of the previous slides. There is some water down there next to 3500 right now, but that's because the sprinklers overwater the 2 planters.
Right.
As far as ramps go, whether they're ADA compliant or not, in order to join those 2 levels, if the if the bike path is constructed, as mentioned before, that's only going to increase the amount and speed of the traffic along the lower strand. I also think that would opening up that end will allow for more of the northwest winds to blow in and down the lower strand and get into all of the fronts of the houses.
Okay. All right.
You know, meeting the standards for an ADA compliant ramp requires considerable new pavement and extensive new railings. The ramp itself has to be level, which is another complication. I don't want to sound unsympathetic to those that use a wheelchair, but I would submit that the Hermosa Pier is only a half a mile away and the Manhattan Pier is 1.5 miles away. Both you can come right, you know, almost touch each other, but not right now without going down one of the existing access ways that are just a little south of us here at 35th.
Right.
But at the pier, there's accessible parking, there's strand access, there's sand access, there's restaurants, there are shops, and there are restrooms.
Okay. Thank
Although
you.
I'm almost done, give me one more sec here.
All right.
Although the north end of Hermosa is an unusual corner, indeed the whole northern border of Hermosa is a bit of a hoot. But really, this is just another bit of residential strip along the strand.
Mhm.
The renderings, you know, with the benches up on the top, and then even this pedestrian, the benches at the bottom, and the pedestrian plaza up at the top, that actually opens up onto a garage and 3 house entranceways as two of the four borders for that plaza.
Mhm.
And as mentioned previously, you know, encouraging further loitering, especially at night, is something that I really oppose. I suppose I've talked long enough, so
Thank
I'll
you,
let you
Richard.
go. Thank you very
We
much.
appreciate that. No, it's good to get a lot of detailed feedback from all of you. And I wanted to circle back as well, maybe, and appreciate everybody with the comments in the chat. And what I had screen shared a few minutes ago, as you saw when Richard was speaking, and I think when Jay was speaking earlier, we're capturing your comments kind of on a digital whiteboard as we go here tonight. We're recording multiple ways, so I was just sharing that just so you see we're capturing that. My colleagues behind the scenes are doing that. But I did want to circle back too, and Jenny, maybe if we could bring your slides back up. I wanted to make sure that you know, we kind of clarified, and again, the basis of this study is largely rooted in, you know, exploring long-term potential impacts from climate change, right, as resulted from flooding, essentially, whether through the storm drain system back into the city proper, through, you know, sea level rise, as well as rain itself coming in. So in its very long-term view in terms of these sorts of impacts. So, and Jenny, this view is, can you clarify, just so everybody's clear, the pink kind of purple area is potential risk for what sort of flood condition?
So I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
So the outfall, yeah, it's scattered out now. It's holding some water. That wasn't what we were talking about. We're talking about inundation. And I see Chris Webb, Moffett Nickel on the call. Maybe you could explain the risk we're looking at here.
Go ahead, Chris, if you had anything else to add. I do want to come back.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Chris.
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hello. What would you like me to address, Jennifer?
So I think one of the clarifications we need to make is that outfall and the outfall extension in the dune, you know,
Right.
What's it doing? What's it looking to protect? What's
It's taking away the low swale from the boardwalk and placing the low spot, which is the Outfall's end, closer to the ocean. So it's eliminating a pathway for water from the ocean to head inland across the beach and reach the boardwalk under certain conditions, that like it might do if the beach were left like it is today and sea level rose a certain amount. That's the avenue, that's the path of movement that water would follow.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying that.
Thank you.
So let's come back to Nadeem and Frank. You should be able to unmute. Go ahead. Do you have further thoughts you wanted to add?
Yeah, I want to add a further comment regarding the dunes and the situation that was mentioned in comparison with Manhattan Beach. First of all the homes in Manhattan Beach sit higher. They're actually sitting at the Hermosa Avenue level, the higher Hermosa Avenue level. Flooding is the last thing that they're worried about. So what are we really protecting here? We're protecting the homes that you're going to obstruct the views for those homes. And I think if you take a poll of all the homeowners whose lower level is going to be obstructed by these dunes, you'll find that they would each gladly take the risk of any potential flooding that has never happened, and it's likely never going to happen for a very long time, not in the lifetime of these structures, rather than chasing ghosts and having to deal with all the potential repercussions and view obliteration that's associated with that, in addition to changing the character for the whole area. And like I said, making it look completely different. You should go up to the Playa del Rey area and take a look for yourself there, what can happen and the resulting impact. Anyways, I would say that we should wait on dealing with the issue until it's a more concrete issue, and then we can mobilize at that point to do something. We can do something very quickly. It has rained very extensively over the last few weeks. There was no flooding. There's no issue in that area overall at all. Those homes are situated low as it stands. The height for these homes is 25 feet as compared to Manhattan Beach 30-foot area. So it's like the worst area of the Strand to do anything like that too, because as you go up further south in Hermosa Beach, you're actually allowed to build up to 30 feet, but not in the Shakespeare Beach area. And to cavalierly talk about 2 to 3 feet dunes as if they're nothing is I think, I mean, you can't imagine the level of opposition that you're going to get. We plan on mobilizing everyone in the area and mounting a very significant level of opposition against this whole plan. Okay. We're going to be very active against it.
Thank you for being clear about that. And so certainly considerations around relative timing, if and when flooding, potential improvements just to reduce the flooding, for example, the dunes, but for example, that concept, if that was to move forward, that a consideration about maybe that can be further out, certainly not in the near term, maybe that can be further out. Is it much longer perspective? What are considerations and implications for not that happening anytime soon, being a longer term consideration when flooding may become more of a higher risk? So thank you for those considerations. And I wanted to acknowledge, I'm hearing some similar considerations here in the chat. So thank you for that. We're recording all that. How we balance all of these potential considerations, these potential changes around, whether, again, it's around mobility, potentially of the bikeway connectivity, pedestrian access, access for people who need additional accommodation, what those potential considerations are, and then, what that means for continued presence of people in and around this area where residents live, and what sort of impacts it has on them. So wanted to, acknowledge some of you who live in that immediate area have, serious concerns about that and would like additional things considered before decisions are made, or totally understood. And I did want to take the opportunity again, state, we said it a couple times in the meeting today, but can't stress enough, there are no decisions being made by the city anytime soon. When the results of this study are brought forward in the coming months to City Council, there will not be a recommendation to go build any specific improvements in the immediate term. Much more detailed technical studies and engineering and design work would have to be done for any of these options that have been shown here tonight, involving much more resources, involving seeking additional funding, involving much more community engagement. So I want to just reiterate that and make sure everyone's clear, nothing kind of being that's been shown tonight is going to be built anytime in the immediate near future, certainly without much more continued ongoing community engagement overall. So, so again, wanted to thank that. Let's see, I'm just double checking the chat here, making sure we, I think we've spoken to different questions that have come in over the chat. So I want to thank you all for your patience on that. Nadim and Frank, did you need to come back again? I can go ahead and.
Yes. Yes, I just want to say something in closing. I'm pretty passionate about this. I firmly believe overall, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's not like the city's flush with money. Anyways, I'm sure you can use grant money and other much more areas that will stand to benefit from such a thing. High traffic areas such as where the bar is, where you talk about doing that circle, that makes a lot of sense. I doubt that's going to have any opposition. Taking a residential area that currently has a lot of charm, that is only residential, has no need to be but residential. There's really, like we said, no restrooms, nothing you can buy. There's not even a shop you can walk to, anything like that. And turn it into an area that's likely going to get congested, drop off, unsafe, taking away views from people, all that for what? For a flooding problem that has never happened and will not happen under the guise of climate or this or that, when all of this can be we can address the only problem that may exist right now, which is giving some level of handicap access with some wheelchair access. And even that is not really needed, because it's not an area that you should be dropping off a handicapped person, because there's nothing for them to do. They can go lots of other places, and my mother is 93 years old and I own a place there, right? So I'm very much wanting to help people that have accessibility issues, but there's lots of ways to address that besides what's currently proposed. I think we're fixing a ghost. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's not broke, let's not fix it. Let's not touch that area. That would be my vote. Thank you.
Again, I wanted to acknowledge, let's see, get a lot of support there. And just to clarify, yeah, I see a couple of questions. If dunes, as were shown, were created, yeah, the intent was that they would not be walked over by humans. Yeah, they would be off limits for people to kind of walk on or trample on. So we'd have to look at measures for what that would mean and what that would look like. Again, just another example, what else would have to be further kind of developed and studied if such a change was to be made. So, but very good. So this was really good. I wanted to acknowledge again, thanks for everything in the chat from all of you overall. Jenny, if we can go to the slide showing the kind of considerations, please, the decision-making considerations, and show that, please, and want to have folks be able to see that and consider. So overall, we just I'll go ahead and let you speak to this, Jenny, a little bit, and we can have folks weigh in a little bit more if they'd like to add their thoughts. But you go ahead and walk everybody through this one.
Sure. So what we're looking at here is really these are the priorities on the left that were outlined in the Caltrans Adaptation Planning Grant. That's really the impetus for this project. Mitigate flood risk, protect the natural resources, improve access and mobility, protect structures, and enhance the ecosystems. And so in the conversations we've had with the community and agency stakeholders, that's gotten to what we've proposed so far. And that's what we want to hear back from you on some of additional factors that haven't been considered and that you want included in the decision-making factor. I think we've heard, we're recording them now. And I do want to reiterate that the next steps involved here is a cost-benefit analysis. We are looking at the costs of the implementation and how that compares to flood risk. We have an economist that's on our team that is looking at certain things, including beach day loss, recreation loss due to flooding and beach erosion and some of that. And that'll be included in this final report and these recommendations.
Would that include property loss too, Jenny? Is that part of it?
It's an estimated property loss value. It's not a specific site-by-site study because that's not, the concern is the public resources for the scope of this study.
Okay.
And so, and then the other piece is obviously how these priorities align with other City of Hermosa Beach priorities that have outlined in other planning documents and other priorities for the city, including, we've heard pretty loud and clear, green infrastructure for water quality improvements. And that's really what a lot of these things do at sites 1 and 2 in particular. Keep that nasty water, you know, as much as we can. Hermosa, I live in Long Beach, I'm at the end of a pipe, Hermosa's at the end of a pipe, and, you know, do what we can to keep the waters clean in our area. I'll stop.
Thank you, Jenny. So, you know, just in our remaining minutes, we wanted to just kind of off that, it's kind of circling back again, these, you know, kind of factors are what are the foundation just for just that, that set up this study, you know, the basis for why conducting this study. And so, so we wanted to circle back and make sure we heard, and I think we've heard, just to mention at least some of the things we've heard tonight, I think from you that you would suggest are additional factors that you mentioned here tonight. You know, the current, the resident impacts the residents in these immediate areas, about any potential changes, whether they be a dune, pathways, plantings. What does that mean in terms of continued mobility, traffic and congestion and access, and impact views, impacts potentially from dunes and things along in similar nature. We also talked about the other Hermosa Avenue and the potential for loss of traffic capacity, right? If reducing from 2 to 1 lane each way, what's that impact? That's a significant consideration on impact on traffic flow, for example. So these are just some of the many things we've been hearing from you tonight that, you know, we'll be bringing back to City Council as part of adding into these factors, you know, for them to think about overall. So, so wanted to acknowledge that for you as well, but happy to hear any other kind of last thoughts you might have about factors along these lines. And again, do recommend you're welcome having you put those in the chat too. So let's see, Richard Gotthofer, did you want to, I'll go ahead. I saw your hand up. Did you want to speak again?
Thank you. I was just in the process of putting it down. I just wanted to touch quickly on 2 other items that I did not mention on the last time I spoke up. And that is that, you know, the real problem here is that the bikers don't know that they're supposed to yield to the pedestrian traffic. And no matter what kind of ramp is built from the lower to the upper Strandway, there will always be crossing the Bikeway, which will be the faster bikers, if anything, right? If you wanted to stay up high, you're making a better Bikeway further south. So that's where the traffic is really going to be. And nothing proposed can really address that, because it's really sort of unaddressable, which is why I don't think it's a good spot for an ADA ramp to begin with. There are other places further south that I think that would be better. Having said that, you know, just improved painting of the crosswalk and adjacent strandways and putting up signs that actually face the Strand and the upper Bikeway, I think would improve the conditions very much. I don't want to suggest speed bumps, because I think, you know, that's going to just bring down, you know, the wrath of God in many fronts if you try to suggest something like that. Finally, you know, if there really is going to be some work that's contemplated here at this corner, I would ask that you would please address the issue of light pollution here. You know, these old street lights are very high and they flood the homes around considerably. There's many new designs that could both eliminate the Strandway in a more efficient and optimal way, and also cut down on the light pollution here at the adjacent homes.
Okay.
So thanks again
Excellent.
for letting me speak.
Thank you, Richard. Appreciate it. And it's another good example of if any potential measures to address a challenge, whether it's mobility, flooding, whatever else in your community, thinking about how we can take opportunities to make other improvements that are kind of, kind of a good fit. Things like lighting, for example. So thank you. And Steve Anderson, you should be able to unmute yourself. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I want to thank you guys for presenting some different options to the city and ideas on how to establish connectivity and flood mitigation. One of the challenges always with the South Bay is that with respect to flood mitigation is, I think one of the attractions to the beach is that you have unobstructed views and unobstructed access wherever you go. And so while I love the idea of a natural solution like the dunes, I think that's always going to be an uphill fight in trying to get that agreement with the community because of this access element that people love about the South Bay. Those ideas work really well. I've seen it in the East Coast, but I just don't know out there. I think with respect to the bike path on the very north end of Hermosa Beach, I think there's three main things that I'm an engineer as well, and it's the engineering design, and I know that there's people that are concerned about the speeds, and there's engineering solutions, right, to kind of mitigate those speeds. But there's also the other two E's we talked about, right, which is the education element with the signing and the striping, and I think those can really help with that. And also too, I think of course it's got to come down to enforcement as well. I've been a Hermosa Beach resident for a long time, and seeing how some bikers zoom through intersections, and the police stop them and ticket them and make sure that they're understanding of what those speed limits are in that area is really important. And that would be the case for loitering as well. So, but yeah, great presentation. Appreciate it, guys.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for that feedback. Appreciate that. You mentioned the at least three E's, right? Engineering, education, enforcement, for example. So Stephen, thank you for that. It takes a kind of a holistic view, as some might say, about improvements and creating them and then maintaining them. So I also wanted to acknowledge too, in terms of considerations here, decision-making factors, and I think was noted here tonight too, while this study, again, just is looking at option, exploring ideas, nothing being decided here, but if, excuse me, if the city does decide, something caught in my throat. If the city does decide to explore more deeply any of these potential options at these three sites, very close, consistent community engagement with at least residents, property owners, businesses in those immediate site areas and the broader areas is going to be really important along the way. So as we were mentioning at Site 3, at 35th and Hermosa, we have neighbors here tonight, Nadine, Frank, Gary, really saying these are not changes we want to see. We need much more close involvement in anything like this. Point well taken. So thank you for letting us know about that as well. And I think, be happy to hear also in the chat from anybody, it's been a challenge to get the word out, in these times in the last 2 years with everything that's been going on. But I know the city and moving forward wants to redouble efforts to make sure they're getting communications out the best way they can. Feel free to share ideas too about how to continue to spread the word throughout the community. If there's more future studies coming potentially in the years ahead on any of these potential improvements, what are great ways to help get the word out and get people involved? Would love to hear your thoughts on that here tonight. So thank you for that. Good. I think with that, I want to come, Jenny, I think our next slide, because we're getting close to wrapping up here. I want to respect everybody's time here. We did, I think as you probably saw advertised it. Jenny, can you go to the next slide, please? Next slide. Thank you. We wanted to kind of make sure we talked about next steps and you're clear about that. So Jenny, can you kind of tee this up and talk a little bit more about what's coming still?
Sure. The cost benefit report, the funding source report, what types of funding is out there, what can we leverage outside of the local funding, and a final report that's at the end of February is what will be produced here.
Okay, thank you. And I do want to clarify, because I see there have been a couple questions tonight and we've been mentioning over and over, it's kind of been a study. It's not about, there won't be the final report. And Doug, I appreciate if you come back and help to clarify. I want to make sure we state it clearly and unequivocally, but the final report will not be a specific recommendation to City Council to fund and build any of these specific improvements right now at all. If anything, the outcomes of this report would be the council considering further, deeper study on some of these options potentially. Is that right, Doug? Just so we're clear about what the report does and doesn't do.
Yeah, absolutely, Andy. I mean, that's perfectly stated. Again, you know, these are based on projects that were already on the books. Whether there's funding or will to augment them with some of these elements is something that, you know, staff and council will have to weigh in on. I do see in the chat, you know, people have asked, is this ultimately with the council or with a public vote? I mean, we don't typically have votes on capital improvement projects, but we certainly do extensive community engagement on everything in Hermosa, right? So there won't be any surprises, but yeah, no actions at this stage at all.
Yeah, everything and just again, another angle to it, and forgive me if I don't want to be a broken record, but again, any of these concepts we looked at tonight, these options, I mean, none of those are designed, engineered. Nothing could be built tomorrow, proverbially, right? That we've shown tonight, even in the next year or two. There's so much would still have to be. Is that right? Am I?
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, funding has to be identified. There's a Public Works Commission. You know, there's a lot of steps on any projects of this magnitude. So, you know, the public will be involved when the time comes, for sure.
Great, very good. To that end, Doug, if you would, I know you did it earlier, but for those who came later, would you please paste into the chat your contact information? Those of you who are here at the beginning saw that Doug did that, and he's going to put that back in again. And we're also going to repost the link to the webpage for this study. So my colleague Joey's going to put that back in the chat here just momentarily as well. So take a look at the chat here in the next few seconds. And then Jenny, our next slide, I think we're close to wrapping up here, right? Yes, okay, I thought so. I thought it was the big thank you. So I think we've spoken here. I know we'll bring Doug back here in just a second. I think we've covered all the topics we wanted to cover tonight. Again, really want to thank all of you for all the constructive feedback and thoughts. Hearing a lot of concerns about some potential concepts that we brought here tonight that would have to be further studied and considered and analyzed, you know, in partnership with you, with the community. So point well taken. So thank you for providing all those details to us tonight as well. So so I just want to thank you as your kind of meeting facilitator. I want to thank Jenny for spending a lot of time reviewing a lot of this content here tonight. And we'll look forward to wrapping things up in the next couple of months as we just showed about next steps. And Doug, maybe you can, I'll let you say the last words here, and then we'll let people get back to their evening here.
Thanks again, everybody. And I just put my email in the chat again. Please, if you have the time and energy, send me, you know, a synopsis or send me the extended version of your comments, because we do want these, you know, especially, again, next steps, years from now or whatever. These are the kind of the input we'll want to shape the conversations, and then we'll reach back out to you when the time comes and continue it. So please shoot me this, and I'm taking notes. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. One more quick thing, the link to the project webpage, additional neighbors, friends who you think would be interested in this weren't able to attend tonight, please send that link so they can connect. We will have the video of these proceedings tonight. We'll put those on that webpage. It's going to take us about, you know, a week or two to get it uploaded there, but everything you've just participated in tonight, we'll have it back up on the webpage. So anybody who couldn't come tonight can kind of at least experience it, granted secondhand, but at least get caught up, right, as to what's emerging out of the plan. So with that, we'll go ahead and say goodnight. Thank you all so much. We'll turn off the Zoom in about a minute here. So thanks again for making the time and being here and all the thoughts and comments. And we'll look forward to wrapping up the study in the next couple months. And again, have good care, take good care, stay healthy and safe. And hopefully we'll hope for a great 2022 for all of us. So thanks again, everybody. Have a great night and take care.